Football is the ultimate mix of beauty and brutality.
Went right into x-ray, so we saw a tibia fracture that extended from his ankle all the way up to his knee.
How about we honor those players and take a look back at 10 of the most gruesome and scary injuries suffered by NFL stars. Joe Theismann, QB, Washington Redskins. If you followed the NFL for any amount of time, you know exactly where we're starting today. Monday Night Football, 1985. Washington against the New York Giants. Joe Theismann drops back, and then Lawrence Taylor comes crashing in. What happens next is, well, the kind of thing that you just can't unsee. Washington tried to run a flea flicker to catch the Giants' notoriously aggressive defense out of position, but Taylor read it instantly, bulldozed through the line, and when he brought Theismann down, well, that quarterback's leg just snapped. What makes this injury stick out even more is not just the gore, it's the finality. You see, Theismann never played ever again. His career ended right there on the turf. Alex Smith, QB, Washington football team. Fast forward 3 decades, and Washington fans went through another nightmare with a quarterback. This time it was Alex Smith in 2018. On what looked like just another sack, Smith's leg was shattered, broken tibia and fibula, bones piercing the skin. It was actually eerily similar to Theismann's injury, even happening on the same date, against the same team. Unfortunately, Smith's story went to an even darker place. A broken leg is not supposed to be life-threatening, and yet complications set in almost immediately. An infection tore through the wound, and what should have been a standard recovery turned into a fight to save his leg and his life. The surgeons had to perform 17 different procedures, including grafts and skin removals. Heck, at one point, doctors were discussing amputation. Most athletes would have hung it up, and no one would have blamed him. But Smith kept grinding. Months of rehab, brutal pain, and wearing an external fixator that looked more like military hardware than medical equipment. Then came the unthinkable. Less than 2 years later, Smith not only walked again, he played NFL football. He suited up, took snaps, and won games. I mean, every time that he stepped onto the field, fans held their breath, terrified that he'd get hit the wrong way. But he was able to prove that he would not let that injury define him. Nick Chubb, RB, Cleveland Browns. Nick Chubb always let his running do the talking, breaking tackles, chewing up clock, and carrying the Browns' offense on his back. But on a Monday night in Pittsburgh in 2023, all of that came to a halt. Near the goal line, Chubb caught hard and his knee buckled in the most unnatural way possible. The broadcast didn't even show the replay to viewers at home. That is just how graphic it was. And just like that, Cleveland's best player was being carted off with a career-threatening injury. This wasn't the first time Chubb's knee had betrayed him either. Back in college at Georgia, he tore multiple ligaments in that same knee. He rehabbed, he fought back, and he became one of the NFL's elite backs. But tragically, history repeated itself. Ryan Shazier, LB, Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers thought they had their next defensive centerpiece in Ryan Shazier, a linebacker with the kind of speed to blitz, cover tight ends, and erase mistakes for his teammates. He was the kind of player that just made life easier for everyone around him. But then came December 2017 in Cincinnati. Shazier went in for what looked like a routine tackle. Nothing dirty, nothing reckless. But when he hit, his body didn't move the way that it should. He grabbed his back, rolled over, and couldn't move his legs. The entire stadium went dead silent. Even the Bengals sideline looked shaken. Shazier was rushed to the hospital when the updates weren't about a timetable to return. They were about spinal stabilization surgery, about whether he would walk again. It was the kind of reality check that made football feel small. He never played another down, but his story might be the most impactful of them all for the resilience that he showed returning to his life from that gruesome and terrifying injury. Tim Krumrie, DT, Cincinnati Bengals. Rewind back to Super Bowl 23. The Cincinnati Bengals versus San Francisco 49ers. It was early in the first quarter when Tim Krumrie, Cincinnati's all-pro defensive tackle, locked up with Roger Craig, and his leg just sort of gave out. His foot twisted under him, and his tibia and fibula snapped instantly. And boy, it wasn't subtle. It was gruesome enough that the NBC cut away from replays. Krumrie was the anchor of Cincinnati's defense, the guy who never came off the field. Trainers had to stabilize his leg right there on the turf. He had broken it in multiple places, later needing a 15-inch steel rod in order to hold it together. What's wild is that he came back the next season. Most players would have just called it a career career, but Krumrie refused. By 1989, he was back in the middle of that defensive line like nothing had ever happened. That is toughness that you cannot fake. A broken leg in the Super Bowl, and he still turned it into part of his legacy. Kevin Everett, TE, Buffalo Bills. This one was a weird one. Week 1, 2007 season. Kevin Everett, a Bills special teamer, going about his business as usual, went down on a kickoff tackle. Only once the whistle blew, he didn't move. Trainers sprinted out and the entire stadium went silent. He had fractured and dislocated his cervical spine. For a few terrifying minutes, no one knew if he would even survive. Doctors later said that the injury was life-threatening. The next morning, he surprised everyone, though, by moving his arms and legs. Everett's road back wasn't about football anymore. It was about learning how to walk again. Within months, he did exactly that, though, standing on his own at a Bills home game later that season. He never played again, but that moment became a little bigger than any storyline. Daryl Stingley, WR, New England Patriots. Some injuries don't just affect a team or a season, they change the entire sport. And that's exactly what happened to Daryl Stingley in 1978. During a preseason game against the Raiders, he went across the middle on a pass play. Jack Tatum, known as the Assassin for his bone-crushing hits, leveled him with a brutal shot. Stingley went down and he didn't get back up. The hit fractured his spine and left him a quadriplegic. Stingley spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. The aftermath forced the NFL to look in the mirror. At the time, there were no penalties, no ejections, no real consideration for player safety. But Stingley's paralysis became part of the conversation that eventually led to changes in how the league treated hits on defenseless receivers. Damar Hamlin, safety, Buffalo Bills. If you want the most terrifying NFL moment of recent memory, it's Damar Hamlin in January of 2023. On what looked like a routine tackle against the Bengals, Hamlin stood up, adjusted his helmet, and then collapsed. He went into cardiac arrest right there on the field. Trainers and medical personnel rushed out, performing CPR as players from both teams surrounded him, some in tears, some praying. The broadcast cut away. The crew was just, not prepared to commentate on life and death. For nearly 10 minutes, the entire country sat there in silence. Players didn't want to really keep going. Coaches didn't really care about the game. Everyone just wanted to make sure that Hamlin was okay. And against the odds, he did. Hamlin spent days in critical care, but he gradually improved. The NFL community rallied around him, raising millions for his charity. And then came the part that I don't think anybody had expected. Hamlin actually made it back. He returned to the Bills in 2023, suited up, and even saw a few snaps again in 2024. However, what makes Hamlin's case particularly terrifying is that it wasn't about bones or ligaments, it was about the heart stopping. One of the most horrifying scenarios imaginable, happening live on national television. And yet, the way he and the league responded became one of the most unifying moments in recent memory. Johnny Knox, WR, Chicago Bears. In 2011, his career ended in the blink of an eye. Against the Seahawks, Knox caught a pass, fumbled, and dove to recover it. At that same moment, a defender crashed into him, folding Knox backwards in one of the most disturbing positions that you will ever see. His back bent in a way that made players cover their faces. The trainers rushed out immediately. He needed spinal fusion surgery. At first, there was cautious optimism. Heck, maybe he could return after a long recovery. However, as time went on, it became clear that the damage was just too severe. Knox dealt with permanent nerve issues, lingering pain, and difficulty even performing daily movements without discomfort. His career was over at just 25 years old. NaVorro Bowman, LB, San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers defense in the early 2010s was stacked. Patrick Willis, Aldon Smith, Justin Smith, and NaVorro Bowman. But in the 2013 NFC Championship against Seattle, disaster struck. Seattle was at the goal line, fighting to put the game away. Bowman made an incredible play, stripping the ball out of the receiver's hands as he was going down. It should have been one of the biggest defensive plays of the season. But in the scramble, a pile crashed down on Bowman's left leg, bending it gruesomely. His ACL and MCL were torn instantly. To make matters worse, the referees didn't even give him credit for the forced fumble because the play was blown dead before possession was confirmed. So not only did Bowman suffer a devastating injury, but his heroic moment was erased from the record. He missed the entire 2014 season rehabbing. When he came back in 2015, he still managed to play at a high level, leading the league in tackles. But that injury took its toll. The burst, the agility, it was never quite the same. And over time, Bowman faded from the dominant force that he once was. But which NFL player do you think suffered the most gruesome and scary injury? Who do you think we're right on here? Who do you think we're wrong about? Was there anyone notable that we may have missed? Let us know in the comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, then clicking the like button helps us out a ton. And you know, we really appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, then subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.